Welcome to the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Good morning. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Bold Book of the Day. My name is Dr. Denise Nicholson, and this podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration. Today's episode is with Maestro Stephen Gunzenhauser, author of his debut book, Travels with Stephen, the most famous unknown conductor. Welcome, Maestro.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you, Denise.
Oh, it's lovely to have you, Stephen. It's a
Yes.
pleasure. It's such a pleasure for me to be in the same room with you. Your book, well, to be in the same space with you. Your book, has garnered attention for its rich insights into the worlds of music and a topic close to my heart because, as a devoted orchestra fan from Jamaica, where music is particularly the iconic sounds of Bob Marley resonates deeply with the community,
Well,
with
the
the world.
term Yellow Bird, the most famous tune.
Uh-huh. So you see, everyone, at least everyone I know is familiar with this renowned Mr. Bob Marley. And so
Yes.
we often say that in Jamaica that music is the heartbeat and a universal language, and it transcends boundaries. So with your extensive experience as maestro and conductor, how do you perceive the universal impact of music across the different cultures and genres?
Well, this is a difficult question because it's so general, but I'm always reminded by a slogan or a saying that I heard many years ago. Music is the sound of God talking. And I
Mm,
think I think music is capable of reaching anyone. The only thing that differs is the kind of music. And the one thing that I would love to be able to do, break down the barriers of
mhm.
people who say, well, I only listen to rock, or I only listen to heavy metal, or I only listen to classical. Because music has a wide variety of tastes. And
Yes.
I'll never forget Denise talking to a uh, class of orphan children about music. And I asked them, I said, how many of you have eaten at McDonald's? And the whole class, the hands go up. I said, how many of you have eaten at the green room of the Hotel DuPont, which is a very fancy restaurant? One person raised their hand.
Mm.
So I said, what's the difference? And they really didn't have any prepared answer for it. Well, the reason for the difference between the two is that McDonald's is fast food. It goes fast past the tongue fast and settles in the tummy, and then it fills you up. The Hotel DuPont, you need to savor all of the flavors.
Mm.
And that's the basic difference. So, what that means is you are not denied the option of going and eating at the Hotel DuPont. The only thing you're not able to do is if you can't afford it. And
Right.
that there are ways to be able in today's society, there are ways for you to be able to find the money to do that. But to be able to enjoy all kinds of food is very similar to enjoying all kinds of music.
Wow. That is a great way to shift the mindset of people who like to differentiate themselves by saying, "Oh, I only listen to certain kind of music. I only listen to classical music." And you're saying that really there isn't that big of a difference. If you can afford it, you can do it. And there's so many different ways if you want to listen to classical music, if you want to learn how to appreciate and savor that kind of music, then you can save up for it, right?
Well, Denise, many years ago, I was a professor at Long Island University,
Hmm.
which was in Brooklyn, that bordered Bedford Stuyvesant and Fort Greene, two of the largest ghettos in the United States.
Hmm.
And at the time that I was there, I had a chamber orchestra, and I figured how am I going to make this chamber orchestra relevant to people in Bed-Stuy and Fort Greene? Problematic. Well,
Mm.
I decided to print up tickets at $10 a ticket and drop them on the New York subways.
Mm-hmm.
And the resulting audience was wonderful because it was almost like being in Bogota, Colombia. I had people that were very dressed up, and they had other people that were in very casual clothes, but they all came to discover the music because they had found something that they could do for free without having to
Mm-hmm.
pay for it.
Yes. Something good.
Yeah,
Right.
well, yeah, and
Yeah.
and to be able to hear the concept of instruments working together with one another became really a lot of fun for many people.
Yes. You know, I'm sure you have sounds I've read up on your work and I see that you have traveled the world,
Yes, I
except for
have.
China, as we talked about earlier.
Yes, and Australia and New Zealand.
Ah,
Yeah.
as a world traveled maestro and conductor, I'm sure you've experienced different musical cultures. Can you share one of the most memorable music or moments of your travels?
It is when I'm listening to non traditional symphonic music.
Mm.
It's when I'm listening to uh, a percussion ensemble in Jakarta, Indonesia, or it's when I'm listening to a steel drum band in the Caribbean. All of those are manifestations of people's expression or the desire to express themselves and a medium in which they can do that. And that to me
Yes.
is very exciting.
Beautiful. Yes, I love it. I can visualize it. How did your music career start?
It started when I was 4 years old. My mother played piano, and so she wanted me to study piano. I hated it, but at least I started it. My father was a very famous food technologist, became a famous food technologist. He developed the boil in the bag principle, where you have food that's in a bag, goes into boiling water, and then it's served. It was the first one was brook trout in red wine sauce, and it was done by a company called Seabrook Farms, which existed in South Jersey. So I was supposed to, as firstborn boy, go into my dad's business. Um, the granddaughter of Richard Wagner was a friend of my mother's. She comes to visit us because she was living in New York at the time. And she sees me and she says to my mother when I'm 4 to 6 years old, Stephen is going to be an orchestra conductor. And my mother looks at her and says, You're joking. Stephen is going into his father's business. She said, No, he has what's called a musikalischer Hinterkopf, which is musical back of the head. And
Hmm.
I know he's going to be in music. And my mother thought the whole thing was funny. My father thought the whole thing was funny, but somehow it wound up becoming true. And then uh, I gave up the piano because I couldn't stand it.
Mhm.
But in junior high school, I took up the clarinet. My parents found a $50 all metal clarinet that was Army surplus. And I started with clarinet lessons and never stopped since then.
Wow. Do you
So
remember the introduction to the clarinet? The
I remember how horrible it was the first couple of weeks. It was terrible. I couldn't get a
Mhm.
sound out of the instrument. But within 4 weeks, the teacher said he needs private lessons. And at the time, my parents were paying 50 cents a week for a lesson. And so I started lessons. After 3 months, the man was honest enough to say to my mother and father, Stephen has surpassed my knowledge of the instrument because I'm not a clarinetist by training. He needs to go to a good teacher.
Wow.
And so my parents found a good teacher, and that good teacher almost became like a surrogate father. He took me out to play golf. He played bridge with my parents, he and his wife, and so we became family friends. And every week I would go into his studio, which was at the back of Carnegie Hall, to take lessons. And when I was in that area, the atmosphere just exuded music, and you couldn't help it. It was all around you. And across the street on 57th Street and 6th Avenue was a company called Carl Fisher. And Carl Fisher had a vast collection of music, and particularly clarinet music. And the man who was in charge of it all was named Emil, who wound up on the $64,000 question. And
Mhm.
Emil and I became friends with Emil, even though I was precocious and maybe 12 years old. But I knew every piece of clarinet music that they had at the store. And occasionally, clarinetists would come in on a Saturday morning when I was, after my clarinet lesson at Carnegie Hall, I would walk across the street, meet Emil, and then look at all the music that they had available. And I was introduced to the principal clarinets of the Mexican National Orchestra and to a man named Eric Simon, who is a leading pedagogue in clarinet music. And I just loved it. Oh, it was terrific. And then they invited me to the Russian Tea Room, which is next to Carnegie Hall afterwards.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just became completely involved in the world of music. And then it came time to go to high school. And in New York City, Fiorello LaGuardia had 5 special high schools that he built. Uh, they were public high schools, but they were wonderful. One of them was Bronx High School of Science
Mhm.
for scientists. One was Brooklyn Tech for engineers. One was High School of Music and Art for music and artists. One was Performing Arts for actors and dancers. And I was surrounded by musicians, and I was surrounded by graphic artists. It was just a very heady experience at the time.
It sounds like you fell in love with music through falling in love with the relationship you had with your teacher.
Yes, that's exactly right. My teacher was an inspiration for me. And when I went on to college, I went to Oberlin College in Ohio. And
Mhm.
my clarinet teacher there was able to deal with me because I was at times one of the most obnoxious children you would ever want to meet.
You don't say.
Yes, I was. I was very mouthy. When I
Mhm.
first met my clarinet professor at Oberlin, I was intimidated, but I went into my first lesson. I said, "Excuse me, do you have chapstick? My lips are chapped." He
I
said,
can't. I can't.
"Even if
What
I, even if I did have it, I wouldn't give it to you." So
So,
then
what were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking. That's the
Ah,
problem.
you know, we're young people that
The words come out faster than the brain prepares them. Yes, yes, very much so. So
beautiful story. Thank you so much. You know, I know that you I've read that you have done so many great symphonies and conducting the Beethoven Symphony number 9, which I listened to at least 109 times over the weekend.
yeah,
So I know that you've done that with soloists from Vienna Opera.
hmm
Mhm.
that's
And that
right.
must have been a remarkable experience.
hmm
Can you tell me about the highlights of that performance?
Working with great musicians is
Mhm.
always an enormous pleasure, but it's also a significant challenge because it's a matter of coming together in a relatively short, intense period of time to make things work as if you were always together. Because you're sending out a unified message to the audience of, isn't this wonderful? I think one of the most wonderful comments I get uh, after having conducted a performance is people will come up to me and say, do you musicians get paid for this? because it seems like they're having so much fun. You know, it's a shame in a sense that many people separate work and pleasure. Whereas,
Hmm.
for example, musicians don't work at a concert, even though they do work.
Right.
They play a concert, so it's constructive play, if you will.
Yeah.
Conducting the Beethoven Symphony Number 9 certainly is the epitome of great music. It's not to denigrate any other kind of music, but it is the epitome of music.
Yes. It
And
speaks to your soul.
yes, it does. It does, unless you decide not to listen.
That's
And that's when we
it.
talk about a paradigm shift.
Yes.
That's what is so critical, is that people need to open their ears and allow themselves to listen to all kinds of music.
Yes.
To me, music is like food, and I make that parallel all the time. How wonderful it is to have a variety of foods to eat.
Yes.
I love to cook. I used to cook more than I have in the last 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
but I used to cook and I love to cook. And I sometimes cook Chinese food, sometimes I'll cook paella or Spanish food. And I love food because it brings out all the different colors that food provides to us when we sit down to eat.
Wow. Do those outside interests like cooking gourmet food, or I know you do competitive tennis and golf.
Yes.
Do those outside interests really impact or complement your musical endeavors?
I don't think there's any question that there is a desire in 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 me personally to take the best that life has to offer, and not just in music. That's parochial.
Hmm.
Uh, Music is the stage in which I contribute, but all these other things come into what I am as a human being,
Yes.
and that's certainly what my book is about, because my book is not just about music, but about my travels. Give you one example, Denise.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to travel behind the Iron Curtain between 1980 and 1990 when the
Hmm.
Iron Curtain existed. And my recording producer invited me to his home for dinner after one of the recording sessions. And he takes me in his car, and when he parks his car and he gets out, he starts taking the windshield wipers off the car. And I said, Ivan, what are you doing? He said, you don't understand. In Bratislava, there are 60,000 cars, but there are only 40,000 windshield wipers. It's a big theft thing. Fine. The next time he takes me to his house, he gets out on the left side of the car and takes the windshield wiper off. I'm trying to be helpful. So I go to take the windshield wiper off the right side. He said, oh, you don't have to do that. This is a good neighborhood. So all these experiences wound up, and my wife said she's sick and tired of listening to all of these stories after concerts. I need to put them in a book, and
Yeah.
that's why the book became. And I have a wonderful, hold on one second, Aminta Bro. I don't know if you know of her. She's the president of Bowie State University, and she endorsed the book. May I read it to you?
Oh, please.
Okay. Maestro Gunzenhauser has masterfully woven together a rich fabric of historical accounts with personal anecdotes, creating a narrative that is as informative as it is encouraging. This is a timely work for all to seek context for events taking place around the world today. Maestro skillfully offers the reader a glimpse into the journey for musicians while inspiring and educating in equal measures. Bravo, Maestro Gunzenhauser.
Bravo. Well written.
So
Yeah.
she's a wonderful president in Maryland of Bowie State.
Yes. And she endorses your work.
She does endorse my work. I have other people. a friend of mine who's a Academy Award winning composer said it's the best toilet reading in the whole world because he can read 3 or 4 pages, put it down, and come back to it a few days later
Yeah,
without being perplexed.
those are the kind of books I like also. So I'm looking forward to reading my copy.
You
And
are
I
getting a copy. I sent it to you a couple of days ago.
Yes, and I like to read when I'm traveling because I do read a book a week, but the books that I read during the week are usually like self-development book. So when I'm traveling, I love to read for fun.
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward. I'm going somewhere in April. I have a conference to go to, so I'm looking forward to taking this your book with me for my April trip.
Where's your April conference?
It's in Texas. I'm a nurse practitioner, hospitalist,
Oh,
and
my wife was a cardiac intensive care nurse at Beth Israel Hospital in New York when we met. And she had been twice called upon as the special intensive care nurse for Louis Armstrong.
oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. So someone said to her once, "Hey, you like musicians, you want to meet one?" We are now married 54 years.
Oh, what a blessing. That's
Thank
not
you.
easy, okay, because I've been married a few years myself.
Well, hey, listen, like I'm so fond of saying to everyone, we have a literary marriage. It's
Yes.
called War and Peace. Only with us, it's every day.
I can't wait to hear what she thinks of that, okay? Because
Oh
my
my God.
husband likes to say that we're married. When we go out and people say, "Is this your wife?" He'll say, "Sometimes."
I'm not going to share that with my wife because she could suggest the same thing.
And she
Yeah,
was also the inspiration of you writing this really great book, so you better not say that.
that's right. I mean, and she's the one that told me not to go to Wuhan, China.
Okay? I don't know. She has something special there. Well, she
Well,
is a nurse.
I don't, yeah, there was a very famous conductor who did a movie called Fantasia. His name was
Mhm,
Leopold Stokowski.
mhm.
And I was his assistant in New York. And so when I met Shelley, uh, I invited her to a concert in which Stokowski was conducting the American Symphony, but it required two conductors. And so I was on the stage with Stokowski conducting at the same time he was conducting, and I had a smaller group. It was a work by composer Hans Werner Henze. Shelley walked out, and I said to her afterwards, "What, Shelley? I was on the same stage with Stokowski." She said, "Yes, but I didn't like the music." She was
Just
always brutally honest with me, which to me was important.
yeah. You know, I was just saying the other day to my daughter, she is a musician, and she was telling me that someone didn't like something that she wrote. And I said, you know, it's important to take brutal honest, even though you may not like it. It's such an important part of your work. You have to take it in and listen to their suggestions. And, you know, you may want to do some you may not want to change everything, but you do want to listen to their suggestions and take that into consideration when you're continuing to write.
It's
So I
called
love your advice.
critical. It's called critical observation. It's a good point that you make.
Yeah, you have to be able to take it and don't take it personal. It's your work and it's personal, but don't take it personal like they
What
don't
kind
want
of
to.
what kind of music does she write?
So she writes, she's young and she writes R&B music and pop.
Many years ago, Denise, when I was in my first year at Oberlin, I started a rock and roll record company. With the 45 recordings, they had these small uh, discs that were, it was before compact discs.
I remember those.
And it was called Rockin' at Recess and You Will Be Mine. Two songs that at one point were number one ahead of This Land Is Your Land by the Weavers in Buffalo.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Impressive. I have to
well,
share that with her.
I please tell her it is critical. and she needs to expose herself to as much as possible.
That's right. What is the main message you want your audience to know about your book?
I want people to be able to enjoy life and to be able to deal with all the many different elements that happened in life without discarding them out of hand. If someone hasn't gone through music education, it's no big deal. You just sit down and say, what does this do for me? I worked in Delaware certainly for a while, and I had was introduced at a place called the Wilmington Club, which was a very Tata exclusive club. I was introduced to a member of the DuPont family, and when I was introduced, he said, "Music is the lowest order of priorities for me," and the only thing I could say is, "I'm really sorry for you." And of course, he then walked away very unhappy. But the point that I'm trying to make is we need to keep ourselves open to all kinds of experiences. And
I
it allows us, listening to those experiences, absorbing those kinds of experiences, allow us to see the world in a much larger capacity.
A lot of people don't like to quiet their minds and let their heart speak, and music will do that for you. For me, music helps me to just quiet myself and just let my heart speak to me. So maybe he's one of those people, just don't like to be quieted, like to keep moving and quite and thinking a lot. But it's really a great experience and a great mind developer to listen to music, even if it's not the symphony or the orchestra or classical music. Just listen to music and listen to what it's doing to you, what it's doing for you.
I did a very interesting experiment a few years ago with the Delaware Symphony, and that is I played some videos of very famous movies,
Hmm.
but without a soundtrack for about a minute or 2 minutes. Then I did it again and I did it with a soundtrack. And it is the music that pushes us into an emotional state.
Yes.
My oldest daughter, Marissa, is the chief of operations for a Hollywood composer named Bear McCreary,
Mm.
who did things like The Walking Dead, Godzilla, Black Sails. Those films are really nothing without the great music that goes along with it. And she has 8 composers whom she shepherds in his studio that do what's called the underscore for these movies. And it is the underscoring that really makes these movies exciting for all of us to listen to. We may not even be aware of the music as we're watching the movie, but it's there. It's
Yes.
there and we hear it and it motivates us.
Yes. And it stirs up our emotions.
Yes.
And that is really what connects people's stories, the understanding the emotion or getting emotional about someone else's story. It makes you relate to people on a better note. For me, I know that sometimes when people do something that I don't understand, when I hear the story behind them, it just makes it better for me. I connect on a deeper level. So I do understand, that underlaying music is a part of our, even the stories that we tell. When I look at my youth and growing up, I think of music also that accompanied those years.
Mm-hmm.
It's the underscore of my life.
That's absolutely right. And recently, with the advent of streaming on television, I love to watch South Korean and Indian movies,
Hmm.
not just because of the storyline, but because of the music that accompanies them.
Yes, I realize that they're all musical. Most of them that I've seen, they're all musical. Yeah.
Yes, and particularly the dancing and the color that's in so much of the Indian films.
Yes, very.
Bollywood now is even larger than Hollywood.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So,
Billions of people are watching.
yes.
Mm. I know that your recordings, you've sold millions of copies and
Yes.
earned critical acclaim. Could you share your approach to recording classical piece and what you believe sets your recordings apart?
I think the less amount of attention that is focused on individual notes, the better is the expression. People that are sitting there playing their instruments don't need to constantly say, uh-oh, we have to do it again because that note's wrong.
Mhm.
And they take a pianist like Arthur Rubinstein, who is a great pianist. He played with many mistakes, but there was still a profound impact that his music had on people in general.
Yes.
And that's why he became such a great pianist. Uh, I think when I record and when I have recorded, and there have been certainly a lot of discs, I think there's a sense of naturalness that I'm looking to obtain. And that is not easy when you're in a recording studio because you have takes. And in some cases, one of the studios I worked in, the streetcar outside would rumble occasionally. And when it did, that means we had to do a retake.
Hmm.
And yet to splice all those retakes together to make them come out natural takes more time rather than less time. I particularly am pleased with. There's a recording I did of Tchaikovsky Symphony Number 5, which in 1989 was the best-selling Tchaikovsky recording in Moscow. Then I did a recording of Carmina Burana, which was the background music for The General's Daughter with John Travolta. And then I did an interesting project. I started working with the radio orchestra in Bratislava to do Dvorak Symphony Number 9, The New World. Well, the Slovak Philharmonic was furious. They said, that's not right. The radio orchestra is to do all the modern stuff. We're there to do Dvorak, which is our composer. So they then canceled the recording that I was doing with the radio orchestra and had me do all 9 symphonies of Dvorak with the Slovak Philharmonic. And what's really interesting, Denise, about that series of recordings was that the first symphony that Dvorak wrote is filled with mistakes, of transposition mistakes, mistakes where he screwed up in a number of places. So I fixed it before I went to Bratislava.
Mhm.
I got there, 10 minutes into the session, the concertmaster says, can we take a moment, please? I need to talk with you. So I said, sure. So we took a break. He said to me, you know, what you have done is great, Gunzenhauser, but it's horrible, Dvorak. And I was perplexed. What do you mean? He said, you have to understand. When Beethoven wrote a piece of music, from its inception, it was beautiful. But when Dvorak wrote his early pieces, they were not very good. And we're very proud of the distance traveled by Dvorak from his first symphony to his ninth symphony so that you can see the growth of a genius.
I
So
love that. I
I
love
went back and took out all of my work and it became Dvorak's work.
But you know what? There's a lesson in that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times we just try to be perfect and do everything perfect, not knowing that there are lessons and beauty in the growth, in learning and failure and developing ourselves. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you didn't do something perfect the first time. I like to say perfection is an illusion because you are striving instead of or striving to be somewhere instead of accepting where you are and looking towards the good, the better in you. So I love that story, and I believe that you've implemented, because I know that your involvement in creating music and in creating Endless Mountain Music Festival it reflects the dedication you have for classical music, but not just classical music, for bringing that music into unique settings.
Yeah, thank you. When I started the Endless Mountain Music Festival 18 years ago, I think the first program was Mozart meets the tango, and tried to bring, in this first few concerts that we did, try to bring the atmosphere of Buenos Aires to this little town in northern Pennsylvania. And we even had tango dancers on the street in the style of Buenos Aires, dancing the tango on the street with a boombox. Uh, then I had Beethoven meets the blues, and the festival has grown. And right now, it's up, after 18 years. It's up to 65 musicians. Uh, we have an orchestra made up of players from all over the world, and we have 18 concerts in 17 days. So it's a very busy time. And I have to juggle that between writing my book.
Where can we find your book?
Well, the book is available through Barnes and Noble. It's also available through Amazon, either in Kindle format or in
Mhm.
regular format. And of course, you don't have to find the book because I've sent one to you,
Oh, thank
Denise.
you so much. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yes.
Now, if we wanted a signed copy, are we going to, is the audience going to get an opportunity to meet you? I know mine is going to be signed.
Well, hopefully, yes, yours will be signed.
Thank you.
It will be available through Barnes and Noble,
Ah,
and there'll be signing opportunities through Barnes and Noble.
coming.
In addition, I have a website, stephengunzenhauser.com,
Okay.
and people can go there and ask, they would like to buy a book and have me sign it.
Yes,
So
because
yes,
that is also an added layer of richness to the book, that you own, that the author, signed it, put a
yeah.
piece of another piece of himself
And
in it.
I've been very lucky and very fortunate. When I started this project, I didn't know how good or how bad it was going to be. In the first week of sales, it was #1 for new releases,
Oh
and
my,
it was number 16 overall sales. So
yes,
I'm not going to get
very
rich.
well.
I'm not going to get rich from royalties, but I still receive royalties from my 80 compact discs.
But you know what? There's a rich message for the audience. So you're sharing that abundance with the audience globally, because you can get this book anywhere in the world,
That's
guys.
right. I had one sale in Iceland. I had 4 sales in Switzerland. I had 2 sales in Serbia so far. So
Look at
yes,
that. Look at that. Oh, wow.
everything else in the United States and Canada, but that
Yeah.
doesn't count.
It's, you know what? It's available, and you're going to see, the more you get yourself out there, the more people know that you have this book, you'll start to see sales from
Yeah,
all
and
over.
it's not just a book for musicians. That's the
Mm-hmm.
point that I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
and that's the point that Aminta made about the fact that this is a book for people who travel, who have explored the world, or people who have never left 50 yards from their home but
Yes.
would like to know what it's like.
There's a story in there for everyone to
Yeah,
impact you. There's a lesson to be learned from these travels, and meeting new people, and collaborating, and with so many different people. Who was your favorite collaboration?
that's hard to say. It really, there are a number of people that I would put in that category. Certainly, my clarinet professors, both in high school and in college, were very important to me. And my college professor, George Wall at Oberlin, I stayed friends with him until he was 99 years old.
Mm,
And he was a brilliant man. He taught me a lot about music. In terms of conducting, There is a one was a wonderful conductor named István Kertész, who is Hungarian. And when I was a Fulbright scholar, he was in charge of the Cologne Opera House. And the one thing that he never did was take himself too seriously. That's one thing I can't stand when people are called maestro. I don't have a problem with that as long as it doesn't become obsessive or unnecessarily bowing down to someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm Steve and Stephen Gunzenhauser, and hey, I am what I am. That's my job, and I enjoy. I love the hell out of doing it.
Oh my goodness. And I love having this conversation with you. And I'm looking forward to you coming back and sharing more stories and
I
talking.
would be happy to, Denise. Just get back to me after you've read my book.
Yes, 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 when I come back in April.
Yes,
So there
yes,
are three questions before you go that I love to ask all of
yes.
my guests. And the first question is, what's one bold promise that you can share with the audience?
The bold promise is that I will hope that more people will come to symphonic concerts and not consider them classical concerts.
Okay. Just we're
Okay.
going to a concert.
Go to live music.
Going to live music. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's my promise to see more people attending in live music. And my paradigm shift, your second question, is allowing people to be able to appreciate all different kinds of music, to
Yes.
be able to allow music to being a motivating factor for enjoying life.
Yes. Beautiful. And what's one bold move you'd like to make in the future?
Um, I think what I would love to do in the future is write a sequel to this book,
Mhm.
because there's so many, while this book is coming out, there's so many experiences that I have never had. This is all new to me, and it's been wonderful. Uh, Being able to talk to people like you who are informed and educated and sensitive is wonderful, and being able to bring out all the best that is there for me to talk about.
It's been such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys. Please go out there and pick up your copy of Maestro Stephen Gunzenhauser's author of the debut book, Travels with Stephen, the most famous unknown conductor. Please get your copy today, like today. As soon as you hear this, grab your copy. And
Absolutely. Well,
that's
it was interesting, Denise,
yes,
before the wrap up,
yes.
when the book first came out, the first day the book came out, my youngest daughter ordered 5 books. She wanted to order more. They wouldn't let her because when she ordered the 5 books, some company in Philadelphia or Ben Salem, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, bought up all of Barnes and Noble's stock in my book in order to resell them for $75 a copy.
Wow. So
So
that's a
now,
game that they play. I don't like it because it's limiting the reach. I believe it's limiting the reach.
yes, exactly, absolutely. And fortunately, Barnes and Noble is now printing more copies, so it is
Excellent.
available. Yeah,
Beautiful. So it's
thank you.
not sold out. Even if you see that sign, guys, just keep pressing,
Just ask, and
continue
or
and
go to
yeah,
Amazon, and
yeah.
Amazon has it on Kindle as well as ebook as well as print.
Or you can go to Stephen
Or
Gunzenhauser's
you can.
website.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have no excuses. Thank you so much for being a part of this beautiful conversation, for creating this wonderful message, this impactful book that I know is going to change some lives and give them hope and inspiration. Now, if you would like to write a book and you don't know where to start, please send me a letter at authordnicholson@gmail.com. I have the Writing Incubator Challenge, and I will help you get your book idea out of your head and onto paper so that you can become the published author that you've been dreaming of. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.